Entertaining, informative, and educational. Inspiring content that makes a difference.
This is the Maximus Troy Publications Broadcasting Network.
Join the Academy. The Breeders' Academy proudly presents Bred to Perfection with Kenny Troiano, a show for serious breeders.
Whether you are looking to create a new strain or simply improve an old one, you have come to the right place.
Daddy, I want more chickens.
Oh, boy.
Now, here's your host, Kenny Troiano.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Bred to Perfection. My name is Kenny Troiano, and this, my friends, is the podcast devoted to helping you become a better breeder and taking your strain to the next level. That's right, my friends. It doesn't matter if you are brand new to breeding or you've been breeding for many years. There is something all of us can do to improve our fowl for future generations.
Mrs. Knott's chickens are back, and they're angry. The chickens are out for revenge. They're not happy about dinner out.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Bred to Perfection. I'm Kenny Troiano, founder of the Breeders' Academy, and I'm here with Nancy, my wife, and my co-host, Frank Bradley. What's going on, guys?
Hey, guys. How's the weather out there?
Hot. It's so bad.
I'm going to say it. I got to, because I don't get many chances to do it. It feels pretty good here today.
I don't want to hear it.
Now, we just got out of some 90s, so it had been hot. The humidity's been up, but today it really felt good. It really did.
You said it before, where you go out, it looks like a bomb went off. Feathers all over the place. That's what it's starting to look like out in my yard. And I don't blame them. They need to shed those feathers. It is so hot out there.
Yeah. Well, that's one part of a molt, the heat. That'll get them going faster than anything, that extreme heat.
Yeah, it's one of the worst summers we've had in a while.
What are you talking about? You don't have anything to complain about. You sit in an air-conditioned office all day. I'm out in the living room.
I do force myself to suffer for quite a while before I finally give in and turn on the air conditioner.
So, Kenny, what is the new summer schedule?
Well, every other week. For the front end, we're going every other week, and then every other week we do the members roundtable. For the members, they get one every week because they get the front end and then they get the back end, where the general public, they pretty much just get every other week on the front end. So that's how we're going to do it. For a while there, we were doing 2 episodes a week. We would do the front end and then we'd do the back end. Long day for Frank and I. We're pushing 1.5 to 2 hours on the front end and probably even more than that on the back end.
Before, we was going after midnight here on the East Coast.
We're going to do it this way for a while, which I like. It's giving me more time to get other work done. So I'm enjoying that.
That you need.
Because I got a lot of master's class videos to do, and I've got a great list of members roundtables I want to do.
I think it'll work out well.
A couple announcements. We had a little bit of a confusion. No, this is not a members roundtable tonight. We are public. So members, watch what you say. Yeah. And I asked the question to the crowd, how many feathers are on a chicken? And we've got General Patton here that answered it for us.
Did he know? That's pretty good. He got it right.
Ding, ding, ding. He's a big winner.
Wow.
All right.
He nailed it.
Good job. Before we get into our subject matter of the night, we have a story to tell you.
It's one of our members who had an experience, and he thought it would be something that would help other people. So he gave me permission to share it on our show. And it's something we talk about a lot. Nancy said she wants to read it. Maybe you can learn from it.
Yeah, you will learn something from it. So here we go. From David, who's a member. Hello, Kenny. I've been enjoying the program for the past couple of years, and he's talking about the Breeders' Academy. I thought I would let you know of a huge mistake I made. I built a really nice yard and invested quite a bit of money into some nice birds. About a year ago, I gave a couple of hens to a friend of mine. 3 months ago, he decided that he no longer wanted them and gave them back to me. This is where I made the huge mistake. After I got the hens back, he mentioned that one of the hens had been sick about a week prior to giving the hens back to him, but everything was okay now. The hen was much better. He treated the hen with antibiotics and she was no longer showing symptoms. Shortly thereafter, my whole yard was sick, like nothing he's ever seen before. Rattling, swollen heads, lethargic. They wouldn't eat and they were dying off quickly. This happened to about 90% of my flock. I treated them with an injectable antibiotic, which bought me a little time while I was trying to figure out what was going on with them. I took a hen down to the University of Arizona Diagnostic Laboratory and had a necropsy done. It came back that she had ORT, it's a bacterial disease, and coryza. I was consulting with Peter Brown throughout this process. After a lot of contemplating, the best response to the sickness, we decided to cull every bird in my place. If Peter suggests culling everything, it must have been really bad. Needless to say, I no longer have a single chicken. I have completely disinfected my yard and will be starting over again this fall. I will never make that mistake again. Once I get my brood fowl this fall, I'll be locking down the yard. Maybe this story can help someone else who was just starting out.
Yeah.
That's terrible he had to learn that way, though.
Yeah. I appreciate that he let us share it, though, because that had to hurt pretty bad. I'm glad he's not giving up. I told him that, too. I'm glad you're not giving up. I'm glad you're moving forward. Many of us went through this. I've seen diseases come in my yard and knock my fowl down pretty good. And I've seen it happen to other people. Knock their numbers down to where they only had maybe a cock and hen out of a whole flock. And thank God they were at least able to save that so they could recover their strain.
In a situation like that, it's bad enough if you've had the birds just for a couple years. But you've had them 30, 40 years. You've really took pride in what you've done. You made a really nice family. And then you bring one bird in and it destroys everything that you have worked so hard over the years. That's a heart ripper. And I applaud him for getting back on the grinding stone. A lot of people would have just said, hey, I'm done with it. I don't want that to happen again. So I applaud him for that.
That's good.
No, you want to talk about Brian Reeder, what's going on there?
Yeah, this is for my members. I just finished part 2 of breeding silver ducklings and how to improve the color. So go check that out. It's a masterclass video. And I'm going to improve episode 1. I've got a number of illustrations I want to add to it. And then I'll replace it with the one that's on there and we'll jump to episode 2. And I suggest that you order his books. They're some of the best books on color genetics that I've found. And for my members who are watching his masterclass videos on color, which we did quite a few of them, get the books because the books are great companions to the videos.
Brian's a super smart guy. He makes you interested in what he's teaching. He really does. And he explains it so well.
Now, he goes a little bit deeper, but I like how he does it. He does it in a way that you can still grasp it. And I've heard nothing but compliments.
He makes it interesting.
That's well worth joining the Breeders Academy as well. All right. Today we're going to be talking about molting season, which we're dead in the middle of, right?
Big time. If you're not, you're going to be pretty soon. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about the ugly truth about outcrossing. And this is going to be a 4-part series. I just don't know if we're going to cover it in one episode or not. So we're going to see how it goes. But I have it divided into 4 separate parts. And I really want to cover it good because there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to outcrossing. And people look at it as a fix-all. When I look at it the other way around, I think it's the reason why most people are having problems. And they go to outcrossing thinking outcrossing is the answer. It's going to fix inbreeding depression, fix the fact that they're not going to see defects, but it's the outcrossing that's actually causing those problems in the first place. We just thought it would be a good idea to talk about that.
Outcrossing is the Band-Aid for the chicken community.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
It hides things for a while.
Barb has a question for you. Is that 8,000 feathers for domestic chickens or is that for all chickens?
That was a domestic chicken.
That was for domestic chicken.
Yeah, I think it's a 5-pound average chicken. That's the majority of those type birds. And that's like I was telling Kenny, I think some of the birds will probably have way more than that. The heavier feathered, different plumage type bird, like gamefowl. I think those would be up there in number. It's got me curious, though. I may have to take the time one day to check that and see on a cull.
Count them all.
Count everyone.
What if it's 7,999? You going to be disappointed?
Hey, I can find some fuzz on there somewhere.
Frank asked, do you know what the answer is to how many feathers they have? And Nancy and I both got it wrong. Nancy was way off.
Oh, big wrong.
I was closer.
I said 362.
That's maybe a really small bantam.
Yeah.
Could
Maybe
be
a quail.
The website's closed for new enrollment, but there is a way to get in. If you join my newsletter, which is a breeder's bulletin, every now and then I'll send out invites. So you're going to get a lot of great information, a lot of free ebooks, bonus material, downloadable PDFs. It's been working out really good. We're actually getting new members more than we were getting before because of those invites. This works out like I hope it does. We won't be opening the registration page. The only way to get in would be through the newsletter.
So let me explain what he means by that. The invite means it's an invitation for you to join the Breeders Academy. But in order to get that invite, you need to join the free newsletter. And within the emails that you will be getting, there will be an invite for you to join. So that's what he's talking about for the invites.
Go to www.breedersacademy.com or click the QR code.
Stephen Miller said mine only have about 4,000 feathers right now. He's lucky. I think I've got some that might have 3 or 4 on them.
Uh-huh.
Jeez.
And then next week for the members roundtable, we're going to talk about the cleanup process of the Founders Program. Once people understand how that part of the Founders Program works, then you realize that you don't need to outcross and that you don't need to fear inbreeding. I'm just letting the members know that next week that's what we're going to cover is the cleanup process. And I've got a couple of other really good ones to cover. One of them, I think my members will know what I'm talking about, is one that I sent over to Brian Reeder to look at. And he hasn't got back to me yet. This is a really busy time of the year, so it's hard to get a hold of him. But I think overall the program's good. We're going to go ahead and teach it. And if Brian looks at it and he can punch holes in it, or he has some suggestions, then I'll make some changes and then we'll check it out. So I think we may do that after the cleanup process.
Sounds good. Let me ask you the first question. What is the purpose of molting?
It's a break they take to rejuvenate themselves and get the well-needed calcium and all the new feathers back. So they've got a brand new plumage and an all-new bill of health going into it. And it's also the time the stock goes up on the medications during the molt, because people that constantly give their birds medications have to medicate them during the molt because the immune system is very weakened. That's a big thing. People that medicate really have to medicate through the molt heavily.
Yeah, it's a major part of the bird's life. Every bird has to molt, depending on the type of bird they are. Like wild birds, they don't molt every year. They molt like every other year. Birds that fly, they actually fly for survival. They don't molt as often like, let's say, a ground bird or like a chicken. And then there's even some chickens like the phoenix. They don't molt their tails every year. I think they molt their tails every other year. That's why they're so darn long. But it's all about feather renewal, replenishing the muscle, bone repair, and it's a major part of their health and condition. So without that, could you imagine a bird that doesn't molt and have to carry on all those old feathers all the way to the next year?
Especially the hens.
Yeah. It's not just about the feathers. There's a lot more going on there. Like the hens, they use a lot of their calcium from their bones. Some of it comes from nutrition, but some of it comes from their bones in producing the eggs.
Half comes from the skeleton to produce the eggs. Yeah.
So it's important that they take that time off from laying, go through the molt, replenish their muscle, their bone, and their feathers, and they come out a whole new bird. So this is an important part of the bird's life, and it's important that we take it seriously. A lot of people will put their birds out there and ignore them. Yeah, you don't want to handle them during the molt. That's probably the worst thing you could do is handle them. But you need to give them the attention that they need.
Yeah. And reduce stress if all possible. Don't be switching them around. Leave them where they're at during the molt. Don't be moving them around, because the roosters can get a little enjoyment out of that, but the hens, they really don't like to be moved as much. So you want to keep them less stressed as possible. But this is one thing I got to cover. I was debating on doing it or not. A chicken during the molt, when they're in the beginning of the molt and they're pushing feathers back up through the skin, they have a tremendous chance of getting bacterial infections on their skin. And I'm seeing this new chicken taking dog and cat speak making pets out of them, and they're putting clothes on these chickens when they're molting, thinking it's going to help keep them warm. Well, the only thing you're doing is holding bacteria in. The clothes are rubbing the skin of the chicken, irritating the skin, damaging the feathers. And I know the people's doing it in order to protect their chickens, think they're doing them solid. Really, it's the other way around. You're doing a totally opposite to it. I've seen quite a bit of that here lately, but it can be harmful to the bird.
We'll be right back after word from our sponsor. This show was brought to you by the Breeders Academy, where we will help you to increase your knowledge of breeding, advance your skills as a breeder, and help you to improve the quality and performance of your fowl. As a member, we'll provide you with the roadmap that you will need to create a true family or strain. I urge you to check it out. You've got nothing to lose, and you can cancel at any time. You also have a 30-day money-back guarantee. Simply go to www.breedersacademy.com to sign up.
The Breeders Academy will not only change the way you think about breeding, but improve the way you breed your fowl.
I hope to see you there. So let's get started.
Frank, you're more into the feeding side of it, and I've always maintained a yard feed at about 18%. I try to keep it somewhere around there. As we get into the molt, I start dropping the carbs, the seeds and the scratch, start upping the protein a little bit, somewhere around 20%. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I like that. This is what I do, Kenny. Now, I'm saying 16.5%, but my 16.5% will probably do as good or better than a 21% that you buy from the stores, because I put everything in it that the bird needs. You don't get that in bag feeds. So what I do, I go down to a 16.5% right when the feathers start getting dry and brittle, and I can tell that they're going into the proceeding of the molt because it's hot during that time. I'll lower the fat a little bit. I drop the carbs. I want to get them down to where they're going into the molt rather than holding them back from the molt. Once that happens and they're dropping the feathers out, like Kenny said earlier, it looks like a bomb went off. I like sticking to my feed. I normally, through the cold months, I feed 18 to 20%. But on the molt, I like a good, solid 20% feed, because look at it this way. Their feathers are around 85% protein that's made from their blood. So they have to have the nutrition coming in. And here's the other part. You really have to have a good whole feed during this time, because it's hot, they're feverish, they're in the molt, they don't feel good. So they're not going to eat near as much. And a lot of people's probably seeing this in the molt, because right now, if you've got birds with molting, you notice them, they're not eating as much feed as they normally do. So a whole feeding diet really matters right now, because one, they're not eating that much. And two, they need all the trace minerals and the proteins to get those feathers to grow the way they need. And even with trace minerals, a lot of these feeds have very minimal trace minerals in them. So without the proper diet, it's harder for the birds to molt.
What do you think, and we've heard this many times, dropping the protein down to 13%?
No. I will never, ever go under 16.5%. Now, I will say this. Yes, I was taught in my classes on meat and egg birds to help replenish, get the maximum out of production for them. Now, as far as gamefowl, I'm just not going to do it in gamefowl, because anybody that's got gamefowl birds, raised gamefowl birds, you take his breast off or you take him down too far, you're never going to get that back, Kenny. You're never, ever going to get the body back on that bird like you had him before once he drops down that. Now, meat and egg birds, person has to be the judge on that. But me, with what me and Kenny breed, I'm not going to go there.
Dropping the weight down 20% of its target weight, I don't care what bird it is, it just does not seem like a good idea. That's quite a bit, actually.
That's a lot.
Yeah. In a time when they're replenishing muscle, replenishing bone, and then on top of that, their body's going through the transformation of replenishing the feathers too. So you're going to drop the protein, you're going to drop the overall weight to 20% of the normal weight, at the same time, you want to replenish the muscle and bone. That just doesn't sound right to me.
Well,
and like you said, if we were talking about gamefowl, especially any kind of a light breed chicken, like a Leghorn, gamefowl, Minorcas, any of those type of chickens, you lose the weight, especially in the breast, that just doesn't come back again.
Well, I'll say this to anyone out there listening. If you want to, Google it, look it up, do your research on it. And I guarantee you, if you look up, say, what's the best thing I can do for my birds that's heavy in the molt? It's going to say 18 to 20% protein, high quality feed for your birds. And if you're feeding 18 to 20%, you're not dropping that body weight down none whatsoever. If that was the common trend to drop 20, 30% of that bird's weight, the average would say drop them 20, 30% of their weight. It doesn't. If you go research it in any books or whatever, at least I've not found it, other than some classes that I've taken. I do admit it was said to do that in the meat and egg birds, but that's the only place that I've ever come across it. But on the average, it says to feed a higher protein, a whole diet during the month.
Because if you're handling your birds regularly, they shouldn't be getting real light and real heavy. So you shouldn't be going into the molt with birds that are either way overweight or way underweight anyways. If I'm doing everything properly, I'm going into the molt, I shouldn't have to do things that make them lose weight. Let's put it that way. But once they start getting their feathers in and they start looking good, I feel like they're coming out of the molt. Then I start free feeding them because, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, Frank, this is just the way I've done it all this time, more about feed than I do. I usually free feed them going into the winter because I want a little bit of weight to get them through the winter, because we're talking about that cold weather, the wet, the wind. They're going to start losing weight because of that. My whole goal is to get them through the molt in good order, get them through the winter in good order so that they go into the breeding season ready to go. So I don't have to do a bunch of adjustments along the way to make sure they're in proper weight and proper condition for the breeding season. For me, that's all I care about.
That's all anyone should care about, Kenny. And what you explained there is actually what the goal should be. You've got 6 major components when it comes to your feed. You've got proteins, carbs, fat, vitamins, proteins, and trace minerals. That's the biggest. Now, do I feed them heavy carbs in the summertime in the hot heat? No, I drop those carbs down. You don't want high energy right before the molt or during through the molt. You want feather growth. You want a diet that does require some fat on feather growth. That is good. And a lot of these bag feeds you get is usually 2 to 2.5%. Hardly ever will you see them over 3%. I feed a higher fat content in the molt because it does help with the feather growth itself. Don't get me wrong, I don't want them mud fat, but a little fat will go a long ways with a chicken that's just devouring everything that it takes in its body to help replenish itself through the molt.
You'll agree, and I understand this too, that it's more about the amino acids. But a lot of us, we can't go by that because we're not formulating our own feeds. A lot of times you go to mills, they're not formulating them. They're just saying, what do you want? They give you a list of the grains and the pellets. You put them together. They don't care what you do. They're just producing the feed. I mix my own feeds from bags that are already on the shelf inside the feed stores. I have 6 feed stores in this town. I have to go to almost each one of them to get the feed I need. I mix them myself. So I need to go by the protein levels. So it's more important to me to up the protein going into the molt especially, reduce the carbohydrates. Then I go into the winter when the weather starts getting cold, and I don't exactly try to give them less pellet. I use the all flock, which is 20%. But I do up the corn for the carbohydrates for the wintertime. How's that sound?
Yes. Carbohydrates in the colder months. Now, I do the same thing. In the colder months, I do feed more carbohydrates because you want that high energy feed during the cold months. But that helps them shake off the cold a little bit. You mentioned it a while ago, Ken. You want a little extra fat on them through the winter as well to insulate them from the cold itself. And they've got maybe not as much activity as they have if they was down, say, not so fat. But here in Kentucky, where it gets down to 25 below, if I've got my chickens at the weight they are in the hot summer months right now, in the winter, I'm going to have a lot of dead chickens come cold weather.
Yeah.
A lot. Now, a lot of them's not going to make it through it. So you have to adjust your feed accordingly to the seasons of the year, and especially the molt. The molt being the most important. But a lot of people, they'll feed the same thing all year long, and that's okay. But the thing about it is, They need it when they need it. And if they don't get it, you're not going to get out of them. I've seen birds that I know myself that had the genetic potential to have some of the prettiest plumage out there. And because they didn't have the nutrition that they need, they didn't even come nowhere close to that. So in the molt, if you're not feeding a total diet, you're not going to get the potential on your plumage that your bird is bred for. You're not going to see those true potentials.
So Barb is asking, her birds are out foraging and they don't eat that feed. Is that going to become a problem for them?
It can, because they're going to be lacking a lot of other stuff that they're supposed to get. But even if you feed them a really good protein, say we're leaving vitamins out, even if you feed them the best protein you can, they're still going to be lacking in some of those vitamins. So we've got to feed them the best diet that we can feed them, and we've got to feed them the vitamins that they need to make it through the molt as well. Now, there's one vitamin that I use. It works pretty good, but this is how I see it. A lot of people say, oh, well, mine gets what they get out of just the nutrition alone. I want them to get a little bit more than they need. I'd rather them have just a little bit more than not enough. I've seen wonders in my chickens since I've been mixing my own feed and giving them the vitamins, trace minerals that they really need. It'll just amaze you. Once your bird's nutrition is correct, your health goes up, your birds look so much better. It's just unbelievable what you can get from a whole feed.
Well, think of it like this, too. The farm in the spring is a completely different environment than what we're seeing like right now, for me especially. True. So if Good you go point. Out in my yard, Frank's been here when it was all green. Mm-hmm. Everything was green. You go out there now, everything's dead. A handful of birds that are foraging, but I'll tell you the truth, they're following me around with the feed bucket. They're picking up whatever I'm dropping as I'm feeding. That's what they're doing. But to let a bunch of birds forage out there right now, there's a chance they're going to starve to death out there. They're just not going to get the same nutrients they would from the environment that you see in the spring. So I'd be worried about that. I would make sure that anything that's ranging, that you're feeding them to.
And two, there could be different insects or small mammals or what they're feeding on, the grubs they're feeding on and whatnot. They could be there 1 month and not the next. Yep. So they're constantly had to change their when they free range and that's their only source of food. They're constantly changing their diet to what's available rather than what they need.
You guys got to remember, we're in Southern California and we don't get very much rain in the summer. So everything is died and dead and barren. But you've got like Barb's in Wisconsin where they get some rain up there. So they've got grass all the time. She may have lots of bugs in her grasses and stuff that the birds can feed. She's also asking, should she stop letting them forage during the molt?
Not unless you have to handle them. As long as you're not handling them, I would think that's fine. It depends on her where she lives. But I would still feed them. Even though they're out foraging, I'd have a pan out there and I'd give them feed every day.
That's the way I do mine, Kenny. I've got several feeding stations out to where if you just got one or two, you get these bullies that hang around it and they run the smaller chicks or the younger fowl off and guard it and just play Mr. Bossy Greedy. But I keep several of them out, and this is how I see it. I give them the best nutrition I can. I keep those feeders fed up for my free-ranging birds. And then what they get outside of that in the woods is a plus. So the combination of the two just makes it great.
Yeah.
Because you take birds and you put them out, say, January, February months, and you free range them, you better have them a good nutrition or they're not going to prosper. But if you free range them in the spring, man, they just blossom because they've got the good feed plus what Mother Nature provides. And it's just a great way to do them.
And they're so active. You pick up a bird that's been free ranging, they're nice. They're some of the best birds on the farm. You pick them up, They're solid. They're not real heavy. They're nice and light. They're full. They're in great conditions. They're strong. It's hard to beat. If you can free range your birds, let them run loose. That's the best way. That's what I try to do with a lot of my pullets. I'm not doing that this year because with AI going around, I'm a little worried about birds free ranging. I have some free ranging and I think about it every day. Maybe I should pick those up. But in normal conditions, I usually let the pullets all free range. And then when they get to be about a year old, I start putting them up, getting them ready for the upcoming breeding season.
To tell the difference, if somebody wants to try it, take some siblings, split them apart, take half of them, free range them if you can, free range them in the spring and raise the others up in the pen, and then compare them at 6 or 7 months, and you're going to see a huge difference.
And I'm even talking about not only just the birds that are free ranging, compare those to the ones that are on teepees. Now, a bird on a teepee is usually in better condition than ones in a pen. I agree.
I agree.
But one that's free ranging compared to one on a teepee, no, it's not the same.
No, that little extra they get of what Mother Nature provides is a huge difference. You feed them the same feed, the same percentage, the same amounts, and the ones at free range will mature into better birds than the ones that's penned.
So her problem is she's got food out there for her chickens, but they're not eating it. They just want a free range all the time. So that's her concern. Should she go ahead and pull those in and put them in cages? Let me ask you this. You can't get enough protein from foraging.
Nancy, the best thing she can do is pick them up and check them out.
That's it.
If they're not eating the feed and they're getting everything they need, then great.
Okay.
But here's the thing. What Kenny's saying is spot on. Next month, they may not have that food source. Closer it gets to fall, that food source is going to dwindle. She just needs to keep a check on their body weight. I would keep a little feed out for them just in case they're not getting enough. Not enough that's going to break her up, disposing of it, or it molding or going to waste. But I would keep just a little bit out and watch it, see if they're eating in it.
Picking them up, handling them is the best way to find out. And got to be careful on the molt because they don't want to be handled. You shouldn't handle them. It causes all kinds of problems. For us, it creates man haters, man fighters, and flighty hens.
We'll pick them up after they've gone to roost at night.
That's a good idea too, carefully.
Yeah.
Because I always tell people, do everything you need to do with the birds and the pens before the molt. Right before the molt, make sure the birds are free of parasites, make sure their pens are nice and clean. Do everything you need to do with the birds just before they molt, and then try to leave them alone as much as possible during the molt. And then once they're fully feathered, you don't see any blood feathers, pen feathers, whatever you want to call them, then you can go back to picking them up again, because mess them up mentally. You'll really mess them up.
As soon as those feathers start drying and I see they're going into the moat, first thing I do, I go through my yard, I trim all the spurs, I check their body weights, I check them to make sure their flesh is good, to make sure there's no parasites or anything, because I know it's going to be 2 to 3, 4 months before I'll be able to pick them up. At least get those spurs down, because I have went and not got time to do it, and they would be super, super long in the moat, and that's a danger in itself, because I've actually had birds on the wire itself just hang themselves with their spurs. So try to keep those trimmed down, because that can cause a problem.
And if you can do it, not everybody can. And if you have the space, the pens, if you can put the birds in by themselves, I would. Especially keep the roosters away from the hens. I try to keep the birds solo within their pens as much as possible. You'll go out there, you'll see a hen by herself, you'll see roosters by themselves. The only ones that are together are the young birds.
That's the way on my yard, because the hens, especially when they're in the moat, we said it earlier, you want to keep them stress-free as you can. And if that rooster's mating with that hen, that's some pain on that poor hen's part. So it's going to stress her out. She don't want him around her. A lot of my young hens, I free range them. The ones that's important to me that I can't take a chance on losing, I put them in a pen by themselves.
One of the questions I get a lot is, when does the molt start? And that's different depending on the type of chickens you're raising, which geographical area you live in, the weather itself. So it could start anywhere from August. I've seen some start in July.
Yeah.
I would say that's rare. But they usually start in August, and they can start as late as November.
Mine switched this year. Usually it's late August before mine really start to molt. Mine started the 1st of July this year, so I don't know what caused it. Nothing changed, but we did have a lot more hot, humid weather.
I think that's it.
Yeah, stress will cause them to molt. People says, well, my bird molted in February, or they molted in May. After molting in, they molt back in again. Well, there's many things that can cause a molt. You've got the stress factor. You've got dehydration can cause molt. You've got malnourishment. That can cause the molt. Illness, some sicknesses can cause it, or extreme heat, just like we was talking about. But the extreme heat, that will actually jerk the feathers off of them, and the cold weather will actually cause them to grow in faster.
That's how they force molt them. They do things that stresses them. They change their nutrition. I'm not into that either.
No.
Especially if you're a breeder, you don't want to force them into a molt. You want everything to be as natural as possible, because I look at the molting process as a selection point. How they molt, how long it takes them to molt, when they molt, everything about the molting process is a selection point. I'll cull birds if they don't molt fast enough. I want to see a bird molt within 8 weeks. I'd rather see them earlier, but if they go past 8 weeks, then I'll probably cull them. If I have a bald chicken and she's been molting for like over 8 weeks, I'll cull her for sure. My target is 6 weeks, but I'll tolerate 8.
Going over 8, there's something wrong.
Okay. There's some kind of weakness going on
It
there.
could be many things. It could be genetic. It could be your environment. It could be your nutrition. There's many things that can cause it. But Kenny brought up a good point. I totally forgot about that one. That was a good point.
The suction point?
Yes. Because here's the thing. Before Nancy, I'd have some birds that would do what I call a soft molt. They drop a feather, they grow a feather. They drop a feather, they grow a feather. Then you've got other ones that just goes boom, and it looks like they've been shot out of a barrel of a shotgun. And like Kenny said, I know it's a selection point, because if you take different strains of birds, I've seen them actually on my yard, different strains that I have would molt out at different times. Some would hold their feathers longer, some of them would hold their feathers less. I believe it's a selection point, just like Kenny mentioned.
The molting process itself can be induced by the environment, nutrition, stress, just like you said, but it's a genetic thing too. And if you're seeing a flock of birds that are molting in all different ways, all different times, they're starting at different times, ending at different times, or some are molting heavy, some are molting light, some are gradual, like Frank said, then you probably don't have a real tight family. You probably don't have what I would call a family, actually. But usually if you have a family, you selected them properly, they'll all molt pretty much the same. They'll come back in the feather the same. And I actually like that. And I would say most of the time I select birds, cocks and hens, that do, like Frank said, gradually. I hardly ever see a bald chicken out there. I usually see birds dropping feathers a little at a time and then growing them as they're dropped. The only thing they drop all at once, and that's usually my indication that the molting process has started, when the tails just fall out. Then I'm like, okay, we're on. Here we go. The molting process has started. Count the days. We'll be done in hopefully 6 weeks, maybe 8 at the most. And it's like you said, I usually see it. They drop a few at a time. They rarely ever drop a whole bunch. And before you know it, they're over.
Well, Kenny, I was gifted some henny chickens. It's the gamefowl, and they've got the henny feathers. And I noticed something about them. My other strains was taking 6 to 8 weeks to mold in. Have you noticed a hen usually doesn't take as long as the cocks, because shorter feathers, tighter feathers, that sort of thing. But with that henny, they're just like hens with their rooster. Man, he was done like in 4 weeks or so. Yeah,
wow,
just
I never knew that.
Boom, and molded. And I was like, that's something to think about.
It's funny you say that. Where I know the rooster's lag is not in dropping the tails, getting them fully grown. Where the hen, like you said, it's gradual. Even the tail feathers on my hens, they rarely ever all drop. They too drop a feather here and there and then grow them as they're going. But the roosters always drop all their tail feathers and then grow them all at the same time.
Or like a deer losing his antlers, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. So if there's a lag in the sex, it would be in the tails. That's where I notice it.
And mine does the same thing. It's always the tails, but the bodies, it's like just a few at a time with the wings and the body. They never just lose everything in the body.
No.
But the tail, what you go up and a couple will be out, you come the next day or the day after that, all of them's gone.
There's a reason for that. You know what the reason is? It's because
all ears.
the rooster doesn't like to be bare-butted, and that's an embarrassment for him. And those tail feathers are his biggest accomplishment. That's just my opinion, by the way.
That's his swag.
That's his swag. Yeah.
No, he's growing them nice and slow and gradual because he wants that thing to be as beautiful as possible.
Exactly.
He knows what he's doing.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing, and this really woke me up years ago when I started reading more about nutrition, getting more involved in it. I didn't know how helpful it was to making your birds look so much better. You take a bird and you feed him a poor nutrition that usually has a tail 3 foot long and it's just gorgeous. And you take another bird that is scraggly looking and you feed him what he needs, a whole diet, and then you feed that other rooster that's got the genetic plumage that can have a ton of potential. You feed him a poor diet and he's going to be just as scraggly as that other bird. A good diet can show you the true potential of your birds in most of traits, really.
Because I do believe it's a genetic thing. I think nutrition can give you a nice, healthy, full tail. I don't believe nutrition can determine the length of the tail.
It can determine the length of the tail to the rooster's true genetic potential and not past that.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
Yeah.
If he has a tail this long, you could put every fairy dust in the world on it, and his genetic makeup will never, ever go past that.
That's right.
But if his genetic makeup says he's got a 4-foot tail, you've got that potential there, but his nutrition has to be right, or you won't get the maximum out of it.
Exactly. I do believe good nutrition will help the bird show you his true potential genetically, like you said. But I don't think nutrition can make a bird do what it wouldn't normally do. So if you're thinking you're going to create longer tail feathers by giving them better nutrition, you're wasting your time. I don't care how good the feed is. I don't care how good the supplement is. It's not going to give you longer tail feathers than that bird's capable of giving you genetically.
Amen. I'll say this. That's not only opinion, that is 100% fact.
Absolutely. So what is the one thing you do not do when your chickens are going into the molt?
Handle them.
Well, besides that.
Spray them down with water.
No, that's not the answer I'm going to.
Well,
here's the answer I'm going to. Pick those feathers out.
Oh, yeah.
Plucking.
That's a big one, Frank. Yeah. That's a big one.
No
a lot
plucking.
of people do that. They'll see a couple stragglers, a couple tail feathers that are still hanging on, or they see the tail starting to drop, or they see that they're starting to go in the molt, and they start pulling out the tail feathers. If you want to see twisted feathers, you want to see a poor tail, start pulling feathers out. You're going to ruin the feather follicles of that bird.
Yeah, it damages the follicles.
Yep.
And then you start getting those tail feathers that's just like a twister coming out of them. You can really destroy it. But I'll tell you one even better than that. I know personally guys say it got up around June and the birds would still look good. The feathers would still look good. And they would start pulling their tail feathers out saying, well, that way they'll grow in before November or they'll molt in faster that way.
No, I think that's the worst thing you can do, start pulling feathers out.
I totally forgot about that one right there. That was good to bring up. Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Was it the breeder up the hill, Nancy? I don't want to say his name. I call him my mentor because he used to do everything wrong. I look back now and it was valuable, but I was shaking my head like, why would he do that? He had every medicine you could think of. And he still had the sickest chickens I ever saw. You walk over, they're sneezing and snotting and things coming out of their eyes and their mouth. And they just look like crap all the time. Like he was breeding and perpetuating coryza all year round. It was crazy. So he did everything wrong. But I remember him doing that a lot. Oh, what you want to do to get them to molt quicker and get them to get through it faster. He was pulling all the feathers out of the tails on all his roosters. And then I'd come back a few months later, and it's like you said, that's how I learned that, by the way, is that they were coming in twisted because I followed him for a little while. And I asked Nancy, I was having a problem with twisted feather. And I think it was Tony who told me, don't do that because you're damaging the feather follicle. And I stopped doing it, and the twisted feather went away.
That feather sets in that divot, and the skin attaches to that. So when you pull that feather out, you're ripping that skin. Because a lot of times you pull a feather out, you'll see some blood. So that follicle can either grow completely together, or it can halfway grow back a quarter way, half a way, 3/4 way. So when that feather comes out, it more or less just deviates that feather going up to make it a spiral when it comes out because it's having to squeeze through a tight space.
There's two things that will ruin the tail feather. Pulling out those feathers and a depluming mite. Once a mite gets down in there, really does a number on the tail. It just never seems to recover from that. Even if you kill the mite, the tails never are what they used to be.
Well, they can do the same thing. They can actually just wreak havoc on the feathers itself and just make it grow different, make it heal back different, erode it. So, yeah, they can really do damage. I've seen more people have a problem with those in the last 3 years than ever can. I don't know what it is.
And I think it's a management problem. First of all, you're bringing birds on your farm that already have it, and then you're not cleaning up the area where you're putting your birds. Because I had that problem here. Once I started getting on top of it, making sure I stayed on top of it, I made sure the pens I was putting them in were cleaned up, that went away. The only thing I knew that would fix it was the Avomac. That was the only thing I could use that would fix it. You could use 7 dust. It doesn't get down into the follicle, so you need to get something into them where they're sucking blood that they'll kill that depluming mite. And that was the only thing that I was able to use. And it may be the only reason I ever use Avomac was for the depluming mite. Otherwise, I never used it.
You have to in that aspect, though. That's the only way around it because they'll drink anything else. They're immune to it. It doesn't get them like you said. But once you put it in the blood and it's going up to the blood itself and going to those follicles, then you're taking care of the problem. They get down in the base of that feather, they're actually getting Avomac.
But it's crazy. People are using ivermectin for all parasites now, which I never seen before. When I was a kid and when I was growing up, we always had it on our shelves, even Tony, had it on our shelves just in case. If something else didn't work, usually it was a depluming mite, then we would use the ivermectin. Other than that, we didn't use it. I don't remember ever using it for anything else. Now they're using it for worms.
Yeah. It kills a lot of the worms, but it doesn't kill all the worms.
Well, we don't want to kill all the worms anyways.
Yeah, but they do.
I know.
They do. Here's the thing, and tell me where you hear this at before, Kenny. Rather than using a firecracker, they're using a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, that was something Dr. Dardo said all the time.
And here's the thing, with ivermectin, it's hard on the kidneys, the liver, the major organs of that bird's body. It destroys the kidneys if you use it a lot. If you have to use it, you have to use it. But if you're using it every 2 weeks or every month, you're asking for trouble. You're really hurting your birds.
Safeguard, things like that, they work just fine. You don't need anything stronger than that. But we're not into worming our birds all the time. Matter of fact, we only worm them when we absolutely have to. We don't have a worming regimen. We don't worm them every 2 weeks, every month. I tell people, if you feel like you need to worm them, go ahead and worm them once in a while if you feel like you need to. If you're seeing worms in the droppings, you're seeing worms coming out of the vent, they feel light and you're seeing worms. You've seen all the indications that show you that it is worms, or you're doing the fecal test that you need to do. Then maybe go ahead and worm them, but don't worm them again. The bird needs to build up some immunity to fight some of that itself. We say it all the time. The birds can live symbiotic with the worms, and they should. You should let them.
Yeah. Here's the other thing. One, if I've got a bird that's actually expelling worms out the vent, I'm culling him.
Yeah.
Anyway, because he's not right to start with to let it get that bad. He's not healthy to begin with. Two is, if you're using Ivermac, your birds is not getting the good bacteria in their digestive system that's needed to have a strong immune system. So each time you give them that, it don't only kill the worms, it kills all the good bacteria in that digestive system. It kills everything. So, like Kenny said, one, they can't build a resistance to any type of parasites. Two is you're lowering the immune system because you're killing all that good bacteria. So I can't find a good reason to use it on a regular basis unless it's something for plumage mites or I have to.
I haven't used wormers in years. When I started, I think it was Doug. He was like my geneticist I used to talk to at the time. And he was talking about how there's a genetic factor as far as the birds building resistance to certain parasites. And if you're not seeing certain parasites in your yard, there's a good chance that your birds are genetically resistant to those particular parasites. And I was like, wow, that's cool because I don't see those kind of things. But when I heard that, I stopped worming my birds and I did just what Frank said. If I saw a bird that seemed wormy, really thin, and I'd check out all the other birds and they were fine, I would just cull that bird. I wouldn't waste time with it. Now, if I saw all the birds in the same pen having the same problem, then I thought, okay, something's going on. I got to figure out what's going on here. I got to take care of the problem. But if it's just one bird here or there, I'll cull that bird because to me, that's a weak link. And I don't want to perpetuate any kind of weakness whatsoever within my family.
A lot of times, if you've got a bird, what you're talking about, Kenny, he's got other issues to get in that state anyway. His immune system's not right.
It's like I had all these hens in one pen. And I picked up this one hen and she was full of mites, the red mites. I was like, what the heck? So I took her out, I put her somewhere, washed up, went back in the pen, checked out all the other hens. Not one mite on them, nothing. Not scabs, no signs, no symptoms of mites. Got rid of that one hen, took all those hens out, put them in a different pen, cleaned up the pen a little bit. Never had a problem with it after that. That bird was showing me there was a weakness there. There was something else going on with that bird. So genetically, it was weak. I almost welcome that. When I see that, it's like, okay, good. I don't flip out. I don't go crazy. When a bird shows me its genetic weakness, I'm quick to get rid of it and move on. And my birds get stronger every time I do that.
I had the same scenario happen. Same type mite, the same situation. Got them out, checked them. One hen was working alive with them. You couldn't point without having your finger on several of those mites. They was to the point that her skin was as red as my shirt. Her skin was so irritated. None of the other birds in the pen with her had not one that I could find on them nowhere. Culled her, never had another problem. I agree with you, Kenny.
Nancy, you got an outline here that you added about chickens molting in July. Do you want to do that or do you want us to take a stab at that?
You already talked about that. The heat could be one of them to start them in the molt. The breed and genetics. Sometimes you have a specific breed, that's their normal time is to start molting early. So you've got that. The age of the chicken, when that chicken was hatched. So if you had a chicken that was hatched in March, April, in August, they may not molt very much because they're so young still.
Young birds are going to drop their feathers and grow new feathers just because they're growing. They're going to drop their baby feathers. So I wouldn't call it a hard molt. They're continuously doing that. Look in a pen where young birds are growing and developing. You're going to see feathers dropping all the time and growing new ones. So I wouldn't call that a molt.
They'll have several within the time they hatch and start growing feathers.
Yeah.
They'll have several before they actually go through their first molt. But like Kenny said, it's a soft molt. It's not a hard molt.
But I'm looking at your list, Nancy. Most of the stuff that you're listing here, like age, light exposure, health and nutrition, environmental conditions, duration, a lot of those are induced. Those aren't common. The one that I could see where it would be a problem, where your birds are molting earlier than normal, would be the genetic one, where you have a family of birds and they just typically molt in July. To me, that would be genetic, and that could be a problem. I don't want my birds molting in July. In September, when it's still hot, they're still growing. They're pretty much done.
They're done.
I want them to be done in either October, November. I don't want them to be done in September.
Here's the thing, too, you got to look at is when they were hatched, how you say you want them to start a Pacific month and you want them to finish in a Pacific month. That's what you like in your birds. But if they're hatched in like a late hatch or something like that, you got to remember that, okay, they were hatched a little late or they were hatched a little early. So I'm not going to judge them too harshly.
But we're back what we're talking about, right, Frank? It's a soft molt we're dealing with. We're not dealing with a hard molt.
Yeah. But here's one thing we leave out on it, though, too. You can't pick the month that you want your birds to molt because Kenny's going to molt different than mine's going to molt. Mine's going to start and finish maybe before Kenny's do because your environment's going to be a lot to do with when they start molting. And it's going to be different for everybody. Your environment's going to have a lot to do with it. The days get longer, shorter, more light. But I tell you, the biggest problem that I see in breeding time is they put them under artificial lights. And then they say, hey, why's my birds molting? And it hits in February or March and my birds are molting. They're in full-blown molt. Well, artificial lights can do that if you keep them under them long enough.
Or you make drastic changes like put them on the lights and then take them off. Very few people use the lights properly. They don't gradually put them on the lights and they don't gradually take them off the lights. They either boom, they're on the lights or boom, they're off the lights, and then they wonder why their birds go through stress and then lose all their feathers. Drastic changes in feed, lack of water, extreme weather, illness, disease, disruption in the environment. Those are all things that you can do to get them to go through a molt. I'm not a big fan of that, especially for breeders. I want to know. I don't want to control it artificially. I want to see them do it naturally. I want to be able to cull out the ones that don't molt properly or at a timely manner. I like that soft molt where they're dropping some and growing some back in. I like that. If I saw a hen drop all their feathers like we were saying earlier, I'd probably cull her, especially if I don't need her.
Something wrong.
Yeah, I don't like that.
I've got a couple questions for you. First of all, do older hens drop more feathers than the younger ones?
Depends on the breed, maybe. Because I have some old hens out there, and they're not molting any harder than the young 1-year-olds or 2-year-olds.
Okay. Going back to the feather mites and when the chickens drop their feathers, would it be your best interest to get the feathers out of the pen? But then again, that's stressing the chicken. So what do you do when you know you may have feather mites and you need to get those feathers out of there, or do you worry about it?
If you took care of the parasites ahead of time before the molt, you shouldn't have that problem for one thing. I don't usually have a problem with that. I don't go around raking up feathers myself. They just disappear, whether they get blown away or whether they eat them. It takes care of itself. My only worry is if you got a serious case of Merrick's, that's where Merrick's is past.
And the dandruff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you got a serious problem with Merrick's, then you want to clean up those feathers.
But see, that goes back to your husbandry. Before the molt, you want everything took care of to where you don't have to touch them those next 8 weeks. If you've got old litter in there, say from 2 years ago or a year ago, and the molt's coming up, and your bird's skin has been exposed and it's irritated, they get down in that and bathe themselves. If that bacteria is in that, it's going to end up right on that bird's skin too. So you need to have clean litter. And if you do have to spray them, if you have a parasite problem, wait at night until it's good and dark and you're not upsetting the chickens, and just go through and put a light mist to spray, whatever you spray them for mites with. If you have to, a little bit on your litter, and you're done with it. You don't have to handle them or upset them. Just do it at night when they're on the roost.
One of my mentors decided he was going to stay on top of the feather mites that put the lines in the tails, okay? And so he put some malathion in a bottle with water and put some other things in there too. And he started spraying down the feathers. He went from pen to pen, went back to go see how they were doing, and they were dead.
Yeah, I know some people use it way too strong. I don't go over the recommended use for it, but I've known people that would put 3 or 4 ounces just in a quart of water and spray their chickens with it, or dunk them down in it. I don't care what it is, 5 times stronger than what it needs to be. Anything's going to kill you when you mix it that strong.
Let me ask you this. Why do some people want to force molt?
I don't think anybody should. Like the backyard breeder, the show bird, most breeders themselves, I don't think they should force molt. This is something the commercial industry does because they want all the birds to stop and start at the same time and then control it at the time of year they want it to happen.
More eggs, pretty much that's it.
It's economical for them. It doesn't make sense for us to do it.
I'm not for it whatsoever. I let mine decide when they want to do it by selection or the actual day or the season.
So let's talk about preparing your birds for the molt. Start with cleaning up the pens, check for parasites. I like separating the birds. I'm big into that. Make sure they have plenty of shade, plenty of water. Keep them comfortable and keep them secure so they don't have to deal with predators. Proper nutrition. As far as the nutrition, I don't know how Frank feels about this. Supplements are making the scene more than they ever have. Supplements were always an issue, and a lot of people relied on them, but not at the level I'm seeing today. But the problem is they're using too much. It's only supposed to supplement the feed. And if the feed is off and I need to use the supplement, maybe I'll use the supplement for a while, but I need to figure out why my feed's off and I'll fix that. I don't want my birds relying on supplements. I don't use supplements.
You said it, Kenny. That's what supplements are for, is for inadequate feeds. So if you're having to use supplements to get your birds to show their true potential and they're doing good on it, that tells me you really need to work on your feed and your nutrition because they're not getting what they need. If you're getting a huge jump in your birds on a supplement, then your feed's lacking. That's what it's telling you.
Frank, I've got something here for you. Derek is saying that I've used the mixture that we discussed about 3 months, and the bodies and plumage are coming back, and it's looking great. So I'm very pleased, and thank you, buddy.
You're welcome. I'm glad. I knew it would take you about 3 or 4 weeks before you started seeing any real significant change in them. But man, when it does, you really see it. And later on, when you're ready, Derek, I can get you on something equivalent to what I'm using, and you'll see an even bigger jump from that. And it's all about the right amount of grains, carbohydrates, and your pellet. We can do better than what you're doing right now even.
The next thing would be, and I get this a lot too, do my chickens act sick during the molt? They're going through a lot. They don't feel good. They're feverish. They're losing feathers. Mentally, physically, they're changing. Sometimes they even look depressed and sick. And a lot of people freak out, and that's when they start medicating them through the molt. If you're doing everything you need to do through the molt, just relax. Make sure they have fresh water. Make sure they get the proper nutrition. Make sure they get the shade. Make sure they have everything they need so you don't have to touch them. And I don't think you need to medicate them. If they're looking depressed and a little sickly, sometimes they're just handling the molt worse than maybe other birds would. And sometimes this can actually be a selection point. If they're acting sick and the other ones aren't, I might pull that bird out. I may say, okay, that bird's not handling the molt like I want. Other birds are doing fine. I don't need her. Boom, out she goes.
The fever can do a lot, and I don't do it myself, but if you think a bird is feverish to the point that it's making it sick or it's having a hard time with, you can give them aspirin to help with the fevers. And I've seen certain families that wasn't a very healthy family get to fever so bad or get so sick that it did end up in mortality. A bunch of them would die through it. You can even have some birds die through the molt. It's the closest they're going to come to death without actually dying, I guess you could say. But I got a lot of questions, people that had cockerels that still had their combs hadn't been dubbed. And they're like, my bird's combs are shrinking. They're getting pale and it's shrinking. Well, a lot of times that can mean dehydration or they're sick. But a lot of times in a molt, that's pretty normal because, like Kenny said, they're sick, they don't feel good. They're not drinking as much water as normal. They're not eating as much as normal. Some shrinkage of the comb, some paleness to the comb, the wattles, the face is going to be common and a lot of times in the molt. And it will get better as they get closer to ending the molt.
They look pale. They just don't look good.
That's one thing I can say about mine. Mine's heads stay red, and usually you'll not see no droopy ones on mine. But I have worked hard on my nutrition. And like I say again, I can't stress how important nutrition is to a molt.
Yeah, I rarely see a pale-headed bird, but that's what they do. They see that paleness, they think they're wormy, so they worm them.
Or antibiotic.
They freak out. I hear this a lot, and I think it's genetic, so I don't think you're going to be able to do a lot about it, but a lot of people think they can speed their way through the molt. They can do things to speed up the process.
You can't hurry Mother Nature. It's impossible. Even if you succeed, you're going to pay for it in some way. She's going to make you pay one way or the other. Good or bad.
If it's genetic, there's nothing you can really do. They just need to go through it. It's going to take a little time. It's like hawks. There's nothing you can do to speed up. All you can do is make them as comfortable as possible.
Lacking care, lacking nutrition will slow it down, but you can't make it go any faster. With the correct diet, the correct care, you're doing everything right, it will go faster, but no faster than that bird's going to intend it or Mother Nature's going to allow it.
Although the hen does typically stop laying during the molt, there's some hens that will actually lay through the molt. I even have some game hens that will too.
Mine do. I've even having to break a bunch of them up and them in the molt wanting to go set and they lay all the way through. Now, is that bad of me? Maybe, but that's just the way I do it. My birds, I will not let them lack for nothing. My goal is to keep them as healthy and stress-free as I can all year long. Not only in the molt, but all year long. Give them the best I can.
I had some hens that were going broody during the molt. I go to Tony and I go, what do you think about that? He goes, a hen hatching chicks during the molt, going broody? I don't have a problem with that. I go, okay.
I had 2 hatch off the other day with chicks. I had some late hatch ones, and I already had them mated up. They went setting. So I said, hey, I'll let you hatch. Why not? Check their broodiness, see if they're good mommies, and they're dead in the molt and raising chicks at the same time.
So for breeders, I think they should look at the molt as a opportunity for improvement. Like we talked about, it is a selection point. It's a way of shaping your family. And if they can handle the molt, great. If they can't, then cull them. So I look at a lot of it as genetic factors. So it shows their survival, timing and duration, impact on future breeding. So if I have a hen who molts a certain way, whether she drops all the feathers or does it gradually, molts in August rather than September, a lot of times her daughters are going to do the same thing. So I want to make sure that I'm selecting hens that are molting the way I want them to, because it's going to have a serious impact on their offspring. So I look at it as a positive thing.
It is, and I've got a buddy that has a strain of gamefowl. They're always the first to molt, and by the time the others are halfway through molting, they're already molted in and look like a new penny. And every one of them is that way, not just a few, every one of them. As long as it's that strain, they're the same way. They're back in new feathers before the other ones get halfway. It's like I told him, it's genetic.
Well, I do want to say this real quick, that this was a huge collection of material that we put together. And I sat down for a couple days and just started typing away everything I could think of that had something to do with the molt. And Nancy goes, we're not going to be able to cover all this. I go, no, we're not. But this is all information that's going to be on the website in the show notes. So on the website where the video is, you can click on the show notes and get all the information. We just covered a few things here and there, but there's a lot of information on this page, and that's all going to go with the video on the website. So make sure you check that out, because we covered the tip of it. There's a lot here.
Yeah, we did. There is definitely a lot here. In fact, I kept scrolling through the outline going, where in the hell is he? So one of the questions I have for you, have your hens acted weird or their behavior changed? Other than being bitchy, anything really weird that has happened to you with your hens during the molting season?
You got to be careful that they don't turn flighty, high strung. You got to give them their space. Roosters tend to get a little more aggressive, a little more mean. I try not to judge them through the molt if I can help it. Some things are a selection point, but I do tolerate some things, and I try to give them a little leeway. If it's something that I'm causing, that's a whole different story. If I feel it's genetic, that's a different story. But yeah, roosters tend to be a little more aggressive, for sure.
It's funny you mentioned that, because here lately in these groups, I have seen numerous videos of roosters setting on eggs and acting like hens and curling, putting the eggs up under them. And one was supposedly hatched to 21 days and hatched them off. He done it day by day that chicken on there, and when they was even starting to hatch off. And I had one do that. He sat on them for several days, but he didn't hatch them off. But he would go on every night, and he'd sit on those eggs. And during the day, the hen will go on them, and he'd come off, and the hen will go on the roost at night, and he'd go on the eggs.
I'm feeding them this morning, and I get to this one pen, and I'm getting ready to throw the feed in the pan, and I look around. No chickens. I'm like, what the heck? And then all of a sudden, out comes the hen from the box, and out comes the rooster. They were both in the box.
Now, I've had the cock go in and coaching a hen in, like, here, come in here and sit down, whatever. But when that one started sitting on those eggs, he come out of the pen real fast and was never seen again. So I don't know what happened to him. I don't need a bunch of roosters on the nest.
Wow.
I got rid of him.
I'll tell you this, Barb has got it great. She says, if they want me to hold them, I'll hold them. If they want me to leave them alone, I will. But her chickens still come up and jump on her lap to be held, even during the molt.
Yeah.
She's got some real sweet chickens.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of those domestic are really friendly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. If a couple of your hens turn flighty on you during the molt, will they stay flighty from then on, or will they go back to normal after the molt?
That depends.
Yeah.
If it's genetic, you see it early on. I look at man fighting, man hating, man fighters, whatever you want to call it, the same trait as a hen that's flighty, high strung. They express it differently. If you see a young stag, usually they're high strung and wild before they mature and become man fighters. So if I see it early on, I usually call it right away. And if I have a hen that's typically calm and collective and easygoing, and I can walk in the pen, and then all of a sudden I go out there one day and she's acting strange and she's flighty and high strung, something's going on. I don't know if it's something in the pen. I don't know if it's something going on around her. I don't know if something got her upset. But I'm not going to cull her right away. Now, if she holds on to that going into the breeding season, I'm not breeding her.
For me, I don't take the chance. Now, whether it was man-made or genetics, I'm not going to take the chance that it's genetics. Unless I have to. If it's all I got, then I'm going to chance it. But if I've got others to breed, and I know I was the one that caused her more likely to be that way, I'm still going to pass over because I just don't want to take a chance on it.
Yeah. It might be a good idea. And I don't have this problem all the time. Matter of fact, Nancy knows my birds are really calm out there. I rarely have that problem because I usually stay on top of that. If I see a hen that's flighty, high strung, I can't tolerate it. It drives me nuts. I got to get rid of it.
Yeah. It makes me mad when they act stupid that way. But I can go out, never handle my pullets, and I can go out on the roost and get them and just put them down. And most of them that's never been handled for. They're screaming, they're flopping, they're going crazy, and they're just singing and just chatting and all comfy and everything. Set them back, no problems. But I remember having someone reach up and trying to catch them and grab them, and they'd scream and try to flog your eyes out and everything.
They can become dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
You got to watch it. All right, so let's remind everybody what we're doing next week. I believe it is the Members Roundtable.
Members Roundtable. Yes. My members will know what I'm talking about, most of them, except for maybe some of the new ones. We're going to talk about the cleanup process of the Founders Program. We talked about the foundation stage last week. I thought it was an important one because we got a lot of new members. Quite a few of them were dog breeders. And I thought that was one they really needed to know because it's going to change a lot of what they're doing, a lot of what they believe. It's going to hopefully eliminate the idea that they need to outcross. You never want to outcross with a foundation. You never want to outcross with a family that's already established. The only time we'd ever use outcrossing, and I don't have a problem saying this, is in the very beginning. A lot of times, your birds or your animals that you're getting, you're just trying to get the best you can. And a lot of times, they're already crossed, they're already hybrids, or they're unrelated. So you're forced to do that. So that's okay. And then we clean them up after that. And that's what we're going to be teaching next week with the Members Roundtable. We're going to talk about that cleanup process. Normally, I would have used the cleanup process first, and then I would have went into the foundation stage. The new members and the kind of members we got, it was important to talk about it the way we did. So now we're going to backtrack just a little bit next week and talk about the cleanup process, and I think you'll find it really interesting. I like what we're doing. I don't know how long we're going to do it, discuss elements of the Founders Program, but I'll tell you, Frank, we got some good stuff I want to talk about, like the one I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, especially
Don't
in
say
the back room.
Yeah.
In the back room. Yeah. In the back room.
Yeah. I think the members are going to like what we have planned.
All right, let's remind everybody that we do have an audio podcast that comes out every Monday. You can catch it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, anywhere you get your favorite podcast episodes.
And it's also posted on YouTube. The server that I'm using, they post that audio version anywhere you can get podcasts, every platform you can think of, but they also post it on YouTube. Now, I've got about 270 some odd videos and audios on YouTube right now. Not sure how long I'll keep them on there. Watch them as you can, because sometimes I'll take them off, put them all on the back end for the members. But we do have a lot of the archives of the live show on YouTube. The only thing we don't have on YouTube is the Masters Class videos and the members roundtables and the members Q&As, all that stuff's all on the website. That'll never show up on the front end.
And let's remind them about the newsletter.
The newsletter.
Make sure that you guys sign up for the newsletter.
Yeah, there's a lot of great information in that newsletter. You'll get one once a day for a while, then it moves on to once a week, and then eventually they will stop. But the newsletter is especially important because if you're even thinking about becoming a Breeders' Academy member, the newsletter is one of the best ways right now to get in. Because once you're a subscriber to the newsletter, I'm going to send invites periodically. Okay, so I want to thank Frank, Nancy, for joining me. I want to thank everybody for coming and contributing and asking questions, making comments, and I will see you guys next week.
Bye.
See you guys. Have a good weekend.
Okay, thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you again for joining us on the Bred to Perfection podcast show. This show was brought to you by the Breeders' Academy, where by becoming a member, you can increase your knowledge of breeding, advance your skills as a breeder, and take you and your fowl to the next level.
We can also show you how to create a strain from hybrid crosses or mongrel flocks, and help you to create, maintain, and improve your present strains. We urge you to check it out. You have nothing to lose, and you can cancel anytime.
To join us at the Breeders' Academy membership website, go to www.breedersacademy.com.
Best of all, I'll be there to help you every step of the way.
While you're checking out the Breeders' Academy, make sure to sign up for our newsletter, The Breeders' Bulletin. We provide a lot of free bonus materials and some great information that will take you and your fowl to the next level. Well, that's it for now.
We hope you join us next time for another episode of Bred to Perfection. We'll see you later.
Bye.